Okay, everybody, welcome in. You can see my slides, can't you? Okay, perfect. Welcome to the Great Plains Stormwater Center of Excellence webinar of excellence, our monthly webinar. If you haven't joined us for anything else and you're not familiar with the Stormwater Center, I'm going to go through some of the things that we're some of the projects that we're working on. Once I can switch the slides. So we are one of 4 EPA-funded stormwater centers of excellence. We are in the Great Plains, this headquartered here in Norman. And then there are the other 3. We have the Southwest region headquartered in Nevada, the Center Watershed Protection headquarters, the Southeast region, and New Hampshire and Minnesota jointly direct the cold climate stormwater center of excellence. And each of the stormwater centers have similar goals, doing research and outreach related to stormwater. For the Great Plains, our research projects are GSI forensics, an evaluation of mature GSI systems in the Great Plains and evaluating them compared to their maintenance and operation that they've received or haven't received, and how that affects their performance today. Smart stormwater, which is the topic that we'll be covering here in the webinar today with Kathy and Andy. A GSI feasibility tool is a GIS-based decision support tool, primarily focused towards rural communities, using GIS layers to guide toward identifying good spots for stormwater BMPs in their specific regions. And we have a couple of white papers about extreme event adaptation as storms intensify throughout the region. How do we adjust the design criteria? How do we adjust maintenance and to handle higher pollutant and sediment loads? And we have innovative funding approaches where we'll look through funding opportunities throughout the entire region. We will do a cost-benefit assessment, how long it takes to make the money back on stormwater infrastructure, and an ecosystem service benefit evaluation, how those things that aren't generally have financial association, how can we evaluate the ecosystem benefits that green stormwater infrastructure can provide. And then our outreach section is our webinar. You're here, you did it. Every month we will talk about regional stormwater projects, innovative projects, success stories at the regional and local levels. That's what we're doing today. Innovative policies, how we can structure our systems to help us meet stormwater goals. And we have open houses where it's more public engagement feedback sort of thing, where we will ask you questions directly and you can provide feedback on things that you'd like to see us do in the future. We have technical assistance. Experts provide a targeted review of stormwater design plans and help troubleshoot problems. And we have a huge team of experts here at the Stormwater Center, something for every question you can have. We have somebody that can meet you there. We have rural and tribal outreach, where we prioritize smaller communities throughout the Great Plains and how we can reach them. Next year, 2027, we will host the inaugural Great Plains Stormwater Conference. We'll be in Oklahoma City, and we have a save the date for March 27th to the 31st. Something that we're starting to do is this NASA Globe Observer. It's a citizen science-based application for people to submit data about all kinds of things, from clouds to trees and mosquito habitats and stuff. And that's what's there already. And we want to collaborate with them to sort of build a similar protocol framework for monitoring green stormwater infrastructure. which pairs well with our GSI Atlas as a database of all green stormwater infrastructure throughout the Great Plains. As people identify sites through the Globe Observer, we can add them to GSI Atlas, or vice versa. If we have things on the Atlas that we want to get more information about, we can do more targeted sampling for the Globe Observer project. And then peer communities, where we will be connecting like communities across state lines. So small community with small community, watershed with watershed, county with county, or government agency with government agency, all throughout the Great Plains. Just very exciting. That's on the beginning steps where we're making partnerships, and that'll start to develop here in the very near future. And with that, I can turn it over for bios, Jason.
Great. Well, today we have two very interesting speakers talking to us about smart infrastructure in Kansas City. Andy Sauer from Burns and McDonnell, that I've known since we were in college together at the University of Nebraska sometime back in the 90s. And Kathy G., who is much younger than us, but I've known Kathy for a long time as well, works for OptiRTC, and one of the leading experts in the country and probably the world on smart technologies and applying them. So we're really, really lucky to have them both here. Thank you guys for taking the time to introduce this topic to our audience.
Great. Thanks for having us, Jason. I'm going to kick us off here. Y'all can see that, right? Perfect. Okay, so Andy and I are here today to talk about smart stormwater, of course. And Andy, I'll let you do a brief intro.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Andy Sauer, Burns and McDonnell, like Jason said. Somehow, I guess, Jason, you lost hair. I got white hair, one or the other. I don't know what happened there, buddy. But anyway, I've been in this industry about 30 years, doing pretty much only stormwater management across the Midwest. The last few years, I've been the national stormwater practice leader for Burns and McDonnell. So got to travel more across the country and be part of events like this. So kind of definitely glad today to kind of share some recent experience, some projects that we're applying technology to, such as OptiRTC. And so I'll be kind of giving more of the practical overview of how we implement these, and Kathy's going to give you more of the background and what OptiRTC can really do. So that's kind of how we're going to divide it. So Kathy, I'll turn it back to you.
Sounds great. And I'm Kathy G. I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Alliances for OptiRTC. I've been here for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was a professor of environmental science at Longwood University, where most of my teaching and research focused on rainwater harvesting. And kind of full circle moment, one of my PhD dissertation chapters was one of Opti's first pilot projects. So I've known of Opti and worked with Opti for quite some time. So we're going to do a bit of an intro to what we call CMAC. I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second, what the benefits are of it. And then we're going to turn it over to Andy. He's going to give us some case studies on CMAC implementations, and then an overview of some new design criteria that came out in the Kansas City region. So most of you here probably already know this, but the impact of stormwater on our daily lives goes way beyond just a few rain puddles. It's a massive safety and financial burden. It causes over $4 billion in damages each year, claims way too many lives. And between the fact that runoff carries about 80% of our water pollution and our constant headache of trying to fit these complex drainage systems into our already crowded cities and neighborhoods, this is really becoming one of the most expensive and difficult puzzles that our communities have to solve. In a perfect world, we'd have all of the funding and all of the people we need to build for the future, but the reality is most of us are really just trying to play catch up. We're working with aging infrastructure that really was never designed for the intense storms we're seeing now, and trying to modernize those systems while navigating the strict regulations, the tight budgets, it really has become quite the headache. So between the struggle to hire and keep your qualified staff, the constant pressure of maintaining public safety, we're basically trying to solve a 21st century crisis with limited resources and systems that are many decades past their prime. And the truth is, we're reaching a point where the old school way of doing things just isn't enough anymore. I did not come across this quote on my own. I have to give it to a friend and colleague from Woodard and Curran who brought this to my attention. But it really, this whole situation kind of brings to mind something that the famous author Isaac Asimov once said. We're reaching a stage where the problems that we must solve are going to become insoluble without computers. And I do not fear computers, I fear the lack of them. So these words really hit home because in the world of stormwater, we are officially at that stage. We can't make up for the gap between our limited funding and those rising climate risks just by working harder or digging bigger holes. We really need to work smarter. And this is exactly where smart stormwater systems come into play. They allow us to use data and automation and computers to solve the problems that really have become too big for us to handle on our own. So let's jump into what is a smart stormwater system. At its most basic definition, a smart stormwater system uses real-time data from sensors to make decisions and automatically manage flows and processes. This has often been referred to in the past as real-time control, but since it began, it has evolved to reflect currently available technologies, such as the integration of weather forecast data. So as these new capabilities were added, a new name emerged too, continuous monitoring and adaptive control, or CMAC. You can think of CMAC as like adding a brain to traditional passive stormwater infrastructure. Instead of a basin or a pond that just sits there and fills up and then drains, kind of like a bathtub on a static design, a CMAC system actively manages it. So you can divide a CMAC system into two main categories, hardware and software. On the hardware side of things, you have the sensors. These are kind of like the eyes and the ears of the system. They're out in the field collecting data 24/7. Now, typically we use level sensors to see how much water is in a basin or a pond, but we can also integrate rain gauges, flow meters, and even water quality sensors to measure things like turbidity, dissolved oxygen, or nutrients. Then next, on the hardware side, you have controllers. If we continue with our body analogy, these are the hands and the feet. A controller is a piece of hardware that takes the commands from the software and physically operates the infrastructure. So this is the device that actually opens a valve, closes a gate, or it can turn on a pump as well. And then finally, the software is the actual brain that ties all of this together. It's a cloud-based platform that pulls in all of that sensor data. It combines it with the weather forecasts, and then it runs predictive models to decide the best action to take. It will then send a command to the controller. And on the software side of things, we have a user dashboard that users can use to see exactly what the system is doing and how their assets are performing in real time. So here are some images of some of the major components of a CMAC system. On the left, we have the control panel. That's the brain with a solar panel that's being used as a power source. Then we have the actuator or controller, and that's what actually opens and closes a valve or a gate. In the third picture, you can see that valve. Now, something to note here, the valves don't have to be all the way open or all the way shut. They can be opened by varying degrees to target a very precise flow rate for releasing water. And then finally, we have the level sensor, and that needs to be installed inside of a stilling well, which kind of acts like a buffer zone. It dampens waves and turbulence, and it provides kind of a calm, debris-free surface so the sensor can get an accurate reading. Here's what the user dashboard looks like on a typical CMAC system. So at any time, a system administrator can log in and view the current conditions of the system or view the weather forecast information. The user can also take the system out of automated control and manually control the system if, like, they want to do maintenance or drain down the system manually. So CMAC is really a game changer because it makes existing infrastructure work so much better and smarter. Traditional infrastructure is passive. It's designed based on historical rainfall data for a specific design storm, like a 25-year storm. And so it does the same thing every single time, whether it's a light drizzle or a hurricane that shows up. Adding CMAC makes that same infrastructure active and dynamic. And the biggest improvement is that it maximizes the use of existing storage volume. So by knowing a storm is coming, the system can create capacity ahead of time. This means you can often meet new regulatory requirements or increase the performance of a system without having to spend millions on building bigger ponds or modifying existing infrastructure physically. So compared to traditional passive infrastructure, you're going to get reduced flooding by creating that storage when you really need it. You're going to get improved water quality by optimizing your detention times and carefully controlling that discharge. And then you really get some incredible operational insight because you finally have data on how your system is performing storm after storm. So maximizing the benefits of a CMAC system is really all about timing and predictability. The picture on the left is a stormwater system before it starts raining. The picture on the right is about 5 minutes after it starts raining. All of the passive facilities in a watershed are going to start contributing stormwater to the piping system at roughly the same time. And this creates a problem of capacity. But if we make a facility smart, it can release its stored water before the storm ever gets there when the system is empty, and then use that newly available capacity to store the runoff produced during the rain event instead of releasing it. So this helps reduce the volume of stormwater sent to the system during the storm when all of the other BMPs are contributing flows. So how does a CMAC system actually work during a storm to meet some of these multi-objective goals? Well, here's a hydrograph that shows that process perfectly. It compares a traditional passive pond, which is your teal line, with an active CMAC-enabled system, which is shown in navy. So if we first look at the forecast period on the left, CMAC is constantly monitoring weather forecasts. When it sees a storm coming and it can't fit all of the runoff that is predicted to occur, it's going to proactively open the basin's outlet to drain the water down. You can see that line that's starting to drop down before the rain event even starts. So this is the pre-event drawdown. This is going to create the maximum available storage volume to capture the runoff produced during the storm. And this is what significantly reduces the risk of flooding downstream. The passive system, in comparison, can't do that. It just sits and waits for the storm. Now let's look and see what happens after the storm in that post-storm retention phase. So it's rained, we're filling up. Hopefully we fill up right to the top without overflowing. And then we can hold that water for an extended period of time. And this is where we get the major water quality benefit. As it holds that captured water, it lets all of those pollutants settle out, including that first flush of polluted runoff. And so you get a much better removal of sediment and phosphorus and other contaminants than through a passive facility. And then after that treatment period, the cleaner water is slowly released, as you can see in the post-event drawdown phase. And this is how a single system can provide not only that powerful flood protection on the front end, but also that water quality treatment on the back end as well. Now, when you start to get multiple CMAC systems within a watershed, you can connect them together, link them up, and build a smart watershed network. And this basically acts like the brain for the entire watershed. It uses live data and weather forecasts to make sure all of those assets are working together. And by connecting everything from those valves to even your treatment facilities and even third-party monitoring, the network can coordinate the releases of all of the assets and that balance that flow across the watershed. This, I think, is the ultimate goal of any watershed, is basically using all of the data available to optimize the way that that watershed stores and manages its stormwater. At the single site scale, CMAC makes storage work more efficiently by proactively creating storage before the storm. So the system can provide the same level of flood protection with a smaller physical footprint. We can leverage the system's ability to adaptively manage outflows based on those real-time water levels and the forecast integration. And unlike the passive systems that are constrained by their static outlet structures, CMAC systems can respond more dynamically to forecasted and observed rainfall by opening that valve at the very beginning of the storm event instead of waiting for it to fill up. With that larger effective outlet, the system can discharge at a higher rate at the beginning of the storm compared to the passive facility. And that would be kind of limited to the 2-year sized orifice for the passive facilities. Even during large events, you're only going to be able to release at that 2-year rate until it gets to your next orifice. And so this proactive approach enables more efficient discharge during the large storms while maintaining those peak discharge limits. And because of the size of a BMP is ultimately decided by a large storm, usually the 100-year, you can reduce the total pond volume that you need to comply with regulatory requirements. So beyond just being high-tech, CMAC systems turn passive pipes and ponds into smart adaptive infrastructure. Instead of just hoping for the best, they create that just-in-time storage by emptying basins right before a storm hits. This optimizes the timing between the upstream storage and the downstream release. It's that timing, like that empty and full highway we saw. And that really helps with mitigating combined sewer overflows and flooding. And then by holding water longer after a storm, CMAC increases residence time, giving those pollutants more time to settle out. And when we release the water later, we can do so at a rate much lower than would have been released by a passive facility. And that helps minimize erosive flows that are released to downstream streams. It also can help us maximize our capture and reuse because we're holding that water, whereas otherwise it would just be running off. And then finally, these systems make compliance and O&M much easier by giving us a digital eyes on the ground and automated alerts even when something isn't working or performing as we expect it to. And then finally, from an administrative perspective, we see CMAC provide significant economic benefits. This could be in the form of major capital expenditure savings. It could be a reduced BMP footprint, or it could be being able to retrofit a project and that being much cheaper and quicker than having to build a new facility. The CMAC systems are resilient and they're adaptive. They can easily adapt to changing weather patterns, changes in the contributing watershed, or even regulatory requirement changes. And they consistently enable a BMP to perform better than its passive counterpart. And this overall improved performance, that adaptability, and the continuous data collection and reporting that we get provide facility managers and owners with an overall peace of mind about their infrastructure. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy for 2 case studies in Kansas City. This is a map that kind of shows all of the smart facilities that are online in the Kansas City region, and the 2 that are highlighted in teal are the ones that Andy is going to be talking about. So Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm going to share my screen with my presentation. You'll see that Kathy's slides are much more, polished, formatted, really nice. So she gets an A+ for that. So, see, hopefully you see my slides now.
Yes.
All right, great. So what I'm going to start with here is kind of how at Burns McDonnell, we've been actively working with Opti since about 2017, so almost 10 years. Probably back, Kathy, to similar sites that you were doing for your PhD work. So we've had a long relationship. So I'm going to highlight 2 facilities that we've done here in Kansas City. The first being a retrofit, which we did back as part of the initial Opti had a WRF grant that we piloted some studies, and this is one of them. So this goes all the way back to 2017. So, and it was a retrofit design. And so like Kathy just mentioned, a great way to reuse a facility that wasn't performing very well. And then I'm going to do my second case study, which is on Westport and Mill Creek Park, which is our newest project. So kind of taking you from 2017 all the way through where we're at today. So kind of the beginning and kind of where we're at today are the two case studies that I'm going to cover. So first, Kathy did a great job talking about some of the drivers. I'll just highlight from my perspective what I see as some of the drivers for CMAC. First of all, trying to increase that functional value of existing infrastructure. And that's really this Gardner Avenue one that we'll talk about. The smaller rains were just going in and going out, in this case, going to the combined sewer system. So when you see my abbreviations, CSS, that's combined sewer system. So these facilities that we'll talk about today both go back to the combined sewer system. So when you're talking about a $4.6 billion program that we're trying to reduce the costs down for over a 30 to 40 year period, using CMAC or other smart controls really makes a lot of sense because you typically don't have enough space or enough funding to do all brand new facilities. So you really need to figure out where can I store water more efficiently, and that's what this project was. But then secondarily, we needed to make sure we still had enough stormwater volume to not, impact flooding. So this was a joint facility of trying to keep combined sewer out of the combined system, or stormwater out of the combined system, and not impact the flood benefit. And then the optimization. So being able to retain that where we can adapt to future climate change. And really, some of our longer running facilities just not cost effective, just kind of like that to reinforce Kathy's numbers. This Gardner Avenue that I'll show you, on a cost per gallon, we're less than 2 cents a gallon. And typically our new facilities that we're trying to do, that I'll show you like for Westport, a second example, are well over $3 a gallon. So to retrofit this site, we were very, very cost effectively. We have a couple other sites that I just put on there just to give you some reference. Basically, we are, getting very good cost benefit numbers for these facilities. So to show you where this site's at, so this is in our Northeast Industrial District, NEID, which is up here, not too far from the Missouri River. So you see the Missouri River. If you've come through Kansas City, Interstate 70 turns into Interstate 35. So just to the west or east of that. If you see all the railroad tracks and all the impervious area, it's basically the only green space left down in this industrial area. Here's what it looks like zooming in further. So it's about a 2-acre, originally designed as a dry detention facility. Inflow from the south in two large, a 48 and a 40, like a 42 and a 48-inch inflow culverts coming in, draining all that impervious area. Then the outfall was on the north side there, going back to the west. And so before it was, dry in, dry out after an event. And then of course, after, you'll see here the water being held in this dry detention because we've added Opti. And so the rain has passed, but we're still storing the water for a 24-hour period to improve water quality and to slowly release the water out of this facility. So what does the hardware look like? In this case, we had an existing weir structure that's shown there on that lower right picture. There was a 1 foot by 1 foot sluice gate that was manually operated. So we already had an opening there. The interesting part about the operations of this before we added CMAC was either somebody would go out there and pull the sluice gate and leave it sitting on top of the weir, and it would operate that way probably all summer, or it would be in and they would get complaints about stagnant water and it smelling because no one went out there and opened the sluice gate. So it was either one operation or the other, which either one was very beneficial, right? So we added a 10-inch butterfly valve that you see there with an actuator on top of it to the existing weir structure. We didn't do anything to the weir. That's the way it was before. And then you see on the left the control panel that's open there with all the controls inside. Marine batteries on the upper box behind a solar panel. So that's the operation that was there. That's the equipment that's there. And here's some details about that site. It drains a little over 65 acres of mostly impervious area. We have the ability to store up to the top of that weir of just shade under 2 million gallons, basically, which is about 1 inch per impervious acre. And you see the breakdown in the cost because of the WRF grant also kicking in. This one was very, very cost effective, well less than, like I said, 2 to 6 cents per gallon that we're actually storing. So a really good case study, and this has been in, like I said, since 2017. I won't get into this too much since Kathy did a good job talking about this, but this was essentially our logic when we originally set it up of what the pre-event criteria was, what's the post-event. In this case, we're trying to hold it for upwards of 24 hours. We've actually increased that because the vegetation's done well. I think we now store it beyond 36 hours before we start drawing down. And that's one of the things that can be done with this technology. You can change the programming as your management criteria changes. And so, in this case, we were worried that the vegetation may die off if we ponded too much water. We've found that that's really not the case. So we've been storing it longer to get better water quality benefits. And in this case, every gallon we actually release goes to the combined sewer system or the wastewater treatment system. So it goes to the wastewater treatment plant. So if we can let it infiltrate or evapotranspirate, it's actually better. We don't have to treat it at the wastewater treatment plant. So the longer we hold it and not have to treat it and infiltrate it or evapotranspirate, it's better. So that's the way the system works. Just some graphics to show kind of what Kathy was showing. I'm going to jump to the next one here because this is something we did way back in the pilot, but it's very informative to the owner in this case. The left graph is a passive system using real rainfall events, and you can see that very high intense rain events that without the Opti system, it kind of flew in and flow out. With the Opti system, they observed that we actually achieved the blue line there. You can see that we almost maximize the volume of storage for that second event. So just as Kathy was showing in her third examples, we drew it down slightly, but only slightly enough to maximize the second event. So really able to capture the total runoff for back-to-back events. And then with the dashboard, you also get to see the radar rainfall, which is kind of cool to show of how it happens so that you can confirm kind of how the rain came and went. Then you get this right off the dashboard that's included with the software. And then once again, just to zoom in on that. So that's the passive system. And then with the observed, then we get that radar rainfall. I just showed you how much better performance you get where you're just trying to maximize that second event to maximize the total volume you can store without getting an overflow. This is just kind of reiterating some of the same things. This is a little bit older slide, so I just kind of reusing some of these, but showing kind of how we did. We actually had a camera on this one for a couple of years, which was really interesting to see how it filled up, and we have some camera footage that we got from it as well, which is cool. Okay, now I'm going to jump to our modern case. So this is Westport. If you've ever come to Kansas City, this is an entertainment district now. It's actually where the stagecoach is left. So oldest part of town. And we're completely kind of redoing this to solve some very significant flash flooding. I'll show you how that works here. This site is located in Brush Creek watershed. So just north of the plaza, the big dotted line is the state line between Kansas and Missouri. And we're just north of the plaza area, south of downtown Kansas City. And this is our lovely combined sewer system. So did you love all the pipes? Does anybody see any creeks here? There used to be creeks, but we put them all underground. The site we're going to be looking at up here is mainly is bisected what's called Mill Street. And in Kansas City, most of the streets that are named after Mill Street, that means it's Mill Creek originally, but that's a combined sewer that runs through there now. So we covered up the streams and we made big pipes. And so the only way for water to get out of this facility, this area, is through the combined sewer system, all the way down to Brush Creek at the very bottom. So here's what Brush Creek, or what Westport looks like. It's in that midtown area, just like I said, north of the plaza. So if you see the 47th on the slide, 47th Street to the south, that's the plaza area, and Brush Creek is just south of that. And then Westport is just in that red circle. And then the drone footage of our project under construction is on the right, so you can kind of see the density of the infrastructure and the lack of green space, of course. So I'll show you an example of how it floods here in a second. So this is our July 7th, 2021 event. And first of all, don't drive through flowing water like that. But you may say, well, this must have been a 4 or 5 inch event. This was 1.9 inches of rain that happened in about 40 minutes. And so this is the type of flash flooding that we're trying to address with not only CMAC, but storage, conveyance, and green infrastructure. So to solve this very frequent flooding, we had to take a different view of things. And the way we did that is we developed a full 2D stormwater model that routes all the stormwater on the surface, along with a 1D model of all the underground pipe systems. So it's a 1D of the pipes and 2D of all the surface to generate a completely dynamic, fully calibrated 1D, 2D model to what I call demonstrate performance existing versus proposed. And so I'll go back there. So that area I showed you in the photograph was this area right down here with the dark blue in that video. So that was confirmed with our video, and this is the actual event that we modeled. So the solution before of this area that I outlined in red was to do a double box culvert all the way down to Brush Creek. And this solution had been on the city's books forever, conveyance only, but it was conveyance only, large pipes. And this blue line there was at least $60 million to get stormwater all the way out to Brush Creek. So the question became, is that the best way to do things? And this is Kathy putting that one quote, it's like doing it the old way really wasn't the best. And so could we apply technology? Could we provide a more smart, intelligent solution? So that's what we were tasked to do, eliminate the flash flooding. We had limited enclosed pipe capacity, and this is also within a combined sewer area. So trying to do all these things within limited space. We also had stakeholder issues. So, in these urban areas, it's not enough to necessarily solve the flooding issues. This area was an entertainment district, needed parking, needed accessibility from different waypoints, wanted to integrate, more street trees, and there was an underutilized park area at the bottom part of this entertainment district that's shown in that lower right photo. And you probably wouldn't consider that a park. It was just kind of a green space. So how could we also integrate all those requirements as well? So our design objectives were, once again, to eliminate that severe flooding, leverage affordable and constructible solutions. And we have a very limited area. And this is where I think CMAC really shines. Is when you have limited area, how can you maximize the amount of storage you can do? Because we just didn't have a lot of area to do detention. And then we needed to integrate green infrastructure and those smart controls to not only address the flooding, but to provide multiple benefits within that, once again, that very limited right-of-way area. So our project approach, I mentioned the 2D model. That's model. We used other photographs to calibrate 2 photographs, high watermarks, to make sure their model represents what people were actually seeing. And then we did existing versus proposed. So the existing was what I showed you the video of on the left. And then our proposed condition is on the right using the 2D model. You'll see the bigger green areas. I'll talk about each of those. The largest green area on the south and the north are both underground storage we'll talk about. And then in between along Mill Street, we integrated green infrastructure, pervious parking, street trees, and those types of things. You'll also notice that we haven't eliminated all flooding. We still have some shallow flooding in certain areas. So once again, we had to have the knee of the curve, get the most benefit we could with the limited area that we had. So I showed you the one storm, which is shown here. This is time on the bottom and peak rainfall intensity on the y-axis. And the dark blue line is that storm that I showed you the video of that caused flooding. The other kind of greenish color was another flood event, historical event that we sized our infrastructure for, and that was a back-to-back event. So we had intense rain in the morning, and we had intense evening the following evening. And then the other dotted line is the SCS type 2 distribution, which is what was used to size the larger conveyance that I showed you. Was over $60 million. And the point of showing this together is when we do a nested distribution and we're only looking at conveyance to convey a peak, is that the smartest, most cost-effective solution in these highly urbanized areas? Or can we get, 95% of that solution by looking at real rainfall? And I would argue also using temporal distributions, which are shown in the orange and the purple for a 2-year and 5-year level of service. So we looked at a multiple range of design events. And obviously with the OptiRTC, we can also then adapt to actual rainfall as it occurs. So really looked at a range of events to really size our infrastructure in this case. But really the goal was to get the maximum benefit in the limited space we had. Okay, so what did we do? I'll start down here at number 1 at the bottom right of this graphic. We have constructed, that's already in, I'll show you some examples, construction photos here, of 2 million gallons of underground storage with a CMAC installation on that. As we move up Mill Street, we are constructing a 60-inch conveyance pipe as well as green infrastructure in the form of pervious pavements and street trees. And then at the top end in the Sunfresh, we have another 1.5 million gallons of underground storage. Once again, with a CMAC unit on it, smart controls, and ultimately those 2 units will, be able to talk to each other so we can maximize the upstream and downstream storage. So for the first time in my experience, we're going to actually be able to have 2, and I'll show you a third location downstream, where we'll have real-time controls in a series, which I'm really excited to see how that performs. Along the way, we also updated all the other infrastructure like water lines and other things throughout here. The other benefits, like I mentioned, I won't talk much on this, but we integrated a lot of community benefits along this Mill Street corridor as part of the project as well. And so it's really a system solution of everything from street, pedestrians, and stormwater. So at the top end, like I mentioned, this is at the top end of our project. This is the 1.5 million gallons of underground storage. We really we partnered with a private property owner to get an easement on that property, build underground storage, and then rebuild the parking lot. And then we're using CMAC was able to reduce the footprint of the overall storage. We're able to optimize that performance at the top end, be able to keep stormwater out of the main conveyance until we can release it, and then obviously adapt to future changes. So some cool videos here. This is storm trap units that are 12 feet high. This is the smaller ones. I'll show you the bigger ones. So went in pretty quickly, but in a parking lot application. And this is what it looked like a few weeks ago. So really goes in quickly. So that's 1.5 million gallons of storage. And then down Mill Street, we took the street to look like this. To now look like this. This is should be finishing fairly soon here. This is what their old drone footage looks at that. So all the little bump out areas you can see are going to have pervious pavements. We're integrating a continuous sidewalk on both sides and then rebuilding the street in between with a 60-inch pipe through the center of that street section that connects the upstream storage to the downstream storage. So the downstream storage I'll go to next is just next to that high-rise building down on the south end there that you see, or the top side of that photo. And you see the building there, which is the old embassy, and the park area there just to the east of it. So we integrated a fully new park space on top of our underground storage, worked with local neighborhood organization to embrace some of the history of the site, which has really been cool. And so we were also able to secure additional funding for art and other things in the park as well. So these are the largest units that Storm Trap sells. These are 15-foot tall units. Each of those pieces that they're moving with the crane are 7.5 feet tall. And so they placed about 28 pieces every day. And it took about 3.5 weeks to place all the pieces to make 2 million gallon storage, all underground. This is an above ground view of it. So I just wanted to pan through here to show you how it went. I'll pause here. If you can see on the left part of this, the large box structure is the Opti control box area. We're integrating all the equipment. And so we're backfilling. So all the system there is underground with the new retaining walls coming around the outside. Here's what it looks from a different angle with the retaining walls done. And then, like I mentioned, if you see the little orange triangle down here, this is where all the Opti equipment's at. It's in a very large box structure with a weir shown here in cross section. The stilling pipe is on the wet side, of course, so that's backing up water. We have a 12-inch control valve with an actuator, and then the inflow and discharge pipes. We have about a foot of clearance over the top, the weir in the case of emergency, but we also have the other yellow arrow is another emergency route for the storage. It's completely full that it would de-water onto Broadway and go down the gutter, essentially. Okay, so there's our area again. We also integrated this with an additional project that was done along Main Street. So Main Street is where our streetcar was expanding to. We've captured all that with green infrastructure. And now that all the yellow areas are areas that we have underground storage that will have CMAC on them. So that all then can reuse the existing combined system to allow water. So we're not building a new pipe downstream. We're using storage and then dewatering to the existing pipes. And with that, this is what it kind of looks like in plan view with the other facility downstream, which is going to be 1 million gallons of storage. And overall, this is what it's going to look like in kind of schematic view, where we can dewater that lower 2 million gallons back to the combined sewer system after the rain event, or we can dewater it to help sustain the green infrastructure downstream that then flows into another 1 million gallon tank. And at that point, we can control it back into the combined sewer system. Overall, by integrating all of these types of controls, we've basically reduced the volume by about 40% of the detention we needed. And overall, I think the CapEx savings is well over $20 million in looking at this differently for this site. So really a really cool project. We're building as a progressive design build. So Burns McDonnell is the contractor too. And we're probably about 85% done with this project. So by next year, hopefully we can give some tours of this facility, which would be pretty cool. Just some take homes. I've talked, I think, about all these, but really, you can really reduce your capital cost. I do stress that I think using dynamic 1D, 2D models really helps you understand the system and how to best integrate detention to really optimize your design. Detention in the wrong area necessarily doesn't help you sometimes. So really knowing your system helps. And the other thing I'll say is we've had a great relationship with Opti. I think having that collaborative connection with your technology vendor is very important. If you don't, I think it kind of can hurt you later in the design, in the construction, if you don't collaborate with them in the design phase. So I think that's important. Okay, my final item, so we leave some time for Q&A, is we have integrated this into the Kansas City Metro design standards. So CMAC is an approved technology, which is kind of the first time I think we've done that in the Midwest. So it helps you meet your retention and your detention requirements. So really excited about getting that into the criteria. And if you're interested in the new stormwater design standards for Kansas City, Missouri, that QR code, if you scan it, will take you there, or I've provided the web address to get to the full manual. There's a lot of good information in there that obviously I won't cover today, but really trying to advance and make a modern stormwater design standard really was our goal. And with that, I've said a lot, and I think I'll stop for Q&A.
All right, thank you both so much. That was awesome, and we really love highlighting things that are happening in the Great Plains that are innovative for the nation. And I think this is a really one of those examples. So thank you both for all your contributions to Kansas City and the stormwater management there. Questions from the group? I'll ask a, oh, there we go. So I'm going to read it just so that it's on the recording too. What was the overall construction cost of the 2017 project? Was the original design intended to convey the frequent events as well, or something larger?
Good question. It was originally designed only as flood mitigation for essentially the 100-year event. And so I was panning back to my slides here. The total construction cost for retrofitting it came in at just basically about $26,000 really. And that's really because the weir was there and everything. But the weir was put in at a separate time because they weren't getting any function out of it. So it's kind of the perfect storm. So I don't think that's typical now for even retrofit costs. We typically, for the other retrofit sites, we're looking at somewhere between typically 100 and 150,000 to really retrofit some of these sites. That one that I showed, I think, was pretty unique because it had everything we needed there, and it was really designed for 100-year. And we're retrofitting it to do, now a lot more than that. So.
Andy, have you guys done any water quality sampling at any of these sites to see how it's helping you on water quality?
The ones we did in Kansas for the city of Lenexa, they had a pilot that we had 3 sites in, and we were looking at TSS. We had TSS monitors on them, and we were seeing some better results. They were originally designed, the ones in Lenexa, as extended wet detention. And so the Opti didn't make a huge impact on water quality because they already designed it as extended basins. So they already had like orifice plates on them and things. So increasing that retention time didn't give us a huge bump in water quality, but we did do some TSS monitor on those.
Same question, but for the Westport project.
For the Westport, so all in for stormwater progressive design build, the stormwater components is a little over $26 million. The total project cost is $31 million, but that includes the water main replacement and upgrading or lining the sanitary sewers that are remaining as sanitary only. So.
Hey, I have a question about real-time controls more generally. It might not be a challenge you had in either of these 2 projects, but a social challenge that Jason has brought up a couple times is in that pre-event drawdown phase. If you were to get a forecast that said there was going to be a major rain event, and then you get within an hour of that event, you pull down your water levels, and then the forecast pushes it back, and they're like, "Oh, this storm is actually going to come in a week or so." Is that a challenge you've faced, and do you have like how you responded, or is there steps that you take to sort of avoid that?
Maybe for
I was gonna
Kathy.
look- Oh, yeah, I was gonna look Kathy, yeah.
Well, I was going to see if you had any project specific experience, but so generally as you get closer to an event, your forecast gets more accurate and not less. And so you can decide, number one, you can decide what level of probability of precipitation you're going to believe is going to actually happen, and that's adjustable. And you can also decide at what rate you're going to release leading up to that event. So as you get closer to your event, you would expect that accuracy to improve, and you would increase your its believability, so to speak. And so